This video is brought to you by the ending song titled Unlasting, playing over Shasta and Lipia's scene. Episode 3 of Sword Art Online Alicization War of Underworld is all about meeting our new villain, Gabriel Miller. Gabriel Miller back in USA, Gabriel Miller back in GGO, Gabrielle back in Ocean Turtle, and Gabriel Miller in the Obsidia Palace of the Dark Territory with a little bit of Sinon, Asuna, Shasta and Lipia sprinkled in. And despite the extensive coverage of our villain, we got things to talk about this week, so welcome everyone, it's me Gamerturk, your most reliable source of Sword Art Online information with Alicization Explained, featuring War of Underworld Episode 3, the final load test. As always, timestamps to individual plot points are in the description, as well as a pinned comment for easy navigation, but to give you a quick rundown, we had a good adaptation this week in terms of accuracy, but the way the order of events being shuffled around, it kinda makes it hard to gauge the importance of the adaptation quality. For example, the GGO scene with Supplizer and Sinon, we will talk more about that in depth in a bit, but that was a flashback that should have been in episode 1 of the entire Alicization arc last year, and the same flashback was supposed to be from an entirely different angle this week to give you a different perspective. But I'll give you an extensive summary in a second and go in detail afterwards with individual events, so if you're new to my Explained series, what I do here is essentially provide you all the vital information on characters, events, action, lore from the source material, light novels, things that the anime did not convey properly or just did not have the time to, so you can still see the full picture, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to not miss any of the details in the upcoming weeks as well. But then again, if you want to read the books for yourselves for the amazing experience, Amazon and Book Depository affiliate links are in the description and the knowledge of Stacia awaits you there. So let's get to the detailed summary. War of Underworld Episode 3 adapted all the way to certain bits of Volume 15 Alicization Invading Chapter 17 Part 2. While that may seem like barely anything in terms of page counts, considering Episode 2 had already borderline finished Chapter 16, pretty much all Gabriel Miller scenes were content cut from the previous 2 episodes as expected. There were also anime original scenes, some of which were great hints, some of which are just as absurd as they were back in Episode 6 of Alicization's first half. As mentioned in the intro, we also had a couple scenes being shifted from their counterparts, such as the GGO scene being Sinon's POV, showcasing her trauma from Volume 9, rather than Gabe's point of view that showcased his tactical intuition. Also, Gabe's backstory was more or less cut in half, but one of the anime original scenes hint at the fact that we may get it in detail somewhere down the line, possibly even in the next episode. But this episode begins with the very start of Volume 15 Alicization Invading, the first 20 pages in fact, however it is significantly altered. In the anime, we see Gabrielle diving into Gale Online when they clashed with Sinon and Kirito's squadron, eventually logging out. It's a good tie-in my opinion for the purposes of the anime, creating a clear timeline between his operation in GGO back in episode 1 and the raid, but the concept of explained requires me to talk about the light novel version of this scene, of course. It kinda messes up some of the timeline as well, since this means the operation took like 2-3 days to take place after the initial briefing, but I'll spare you the timeline nitpicks. More importantly, you see, this was the moment where we were supposed to have the GGO flashback scene from the 4th Bullet of Bullets tournament. As mentioned, what we watched this episode was Sinon's perspective from Volume 9 Alicization Beginning that should have been back in Alicization Episode 1, which I'll talk about when the scene arrives, and instead we would be seeing a dream by Gabriel remembering all the events from his own perspective, how he chased Sinon to the building a little bit far behind. As the tactical chief officer, he knew that the sniper would either be on the roof or the floor below. Analyzing the situation carefully, knowing Sinon is a teenage girl, he knew she had to be on the roof because the floor below was a library and a high schooler instinctively would avoid the floor without even realizing, and his tactical gamble had paid off, allowing him to reach Sinon with haste before she could properly set up her sniper's nest and become the winner of the 4th Bullet of Bullets tournament. When Sinon's HP was already below 5%, Supplizer was already more than impressed with her refusal to give up, her fighting spirit. He wished it wasn't just a digital avatar in his grasp, but the real flesh and blood instead. He thought how sweet it would be if such an opportunity were to arrive. But then he woke up with the final words still ringing in his ears. Instinctively, the American had uttered the words in English despite being committed to his fluent Japanese at those kinds of moments. Your soul will be so sweet. And then He remembered the beginning of his obsession before being interrupted by his assistant. It was a much longer flashback that can even take an entire half episode if a little bit stretched. So, in my opinion, they will definitely adapt this scene somewhere in the next 2 episodes to ensure they stick to a 6 episodes per volume schedule with the anime, so I will not spoil you the backstory yet. I will cover it extensively, however, if the anime decides to skip it for sure, but we have seen enough hints to assume they will definitely adapt it. I cannot help you if uncontrollable spoiler tubers have already spoiled you though, because they just don't know the bare minimum knowledge to understand the obvious hints the anime provides. I just have to chuckle every time those people try to clickbait others claiming the new villain is the best villain of the series. Gabriel is pretty much the most shonen villain you will get in this anime, with his motivation being, I'm the bad guy because I'm the bad guy. He is a far cry from the likes of Kayaba, Quinella, or the biggest villain of the series, AIDS itself. Gabriel is pretty much the silent, all-knowing, best at everything, completely obsessed with a single thing kind of villain. If I were to make a list, the only villain he would be beating in terms of being a good villain would be Sugo, and that is a low bar to set. But you'll get why I think that way when his backstory is completely adapted and get to see some of his acts in Underworld in the next couple of episodes. Just don't trust the foxes to brainwash you, as they have been known to be shallow hype beasts at best. Anyways, it's funny to watch the NSA agent speaking to an American citizen in Japanese, but hey, I've grown with American shows where Russian terrorists speak English between each other, so I can't really complain. The scene is a bit shortened, but it's not that vital. The gist of it is, the issue is discussed with the other board members. There was significant backlash towards Gabrielle, the person who normally strategizes in a safe headquarters, to lead the mission. But Gabrielle pretty much gave an ultimatum so he could follow his secret obsession of souls, etc. Moving on to the ocean turtle scenes of Gabrielle. And if you want more information on him, we have a short introductory video we created with SAO Wikia that does not have any spoilers beyond what you saw in this episode. I recommend you check it out by clicking the icon on the top right corner, but I'm very happy how extensively they covered the ocean turtle scenes. You see, the squad Gabriel brought with him is hand-picked, and the extensive coverage makes that very clear. These guys are experts at what they do. Critter is the IT specialist, Brig and Hans are responsible for the chainsaw and explosive respectively, and Poe is brought as the VR expert, as the leader of the Laughing Coffin of Aincrad. He instantly makes it clear by distinguishing between regular goblin and a hobgoblin, which I wouldn't be able to do myself, which it may seem like a minuscule detail, which is why I wouldn't care for myself. That is still the clear sign of his expertise that these people, not really well versed with VR games, do need to have proper guidance in this digital world. While Gabe himself is fascinated by what Kayaba Kiko has created, he is no expert by any means on the subject, so he does need a true VR guide for his operation. I really can't add anything to the ocean turtle scenes of Gabe and Co. It's incredibly fun to watch the interactions between Poe and Critter, the extensive explanations, like even goblins having proper human minds, the expertise of the individuals, also the Emperor Vecta account, which is officially spelled as Vector in the anime, but the subs remain consistent with the official English translation, just causing more issues for us at SAO Wikia, has the ID SA005, so Super Account 005. This is a very cool detail. First off, thanks to Emil and Val from SAO Wikia for digging up some info with me on this. We actually do know 4 super accounts for certain, so far one of the gods of Underworld was a topic of discussion, as even Reki himself had forgotten about Lunaria's existence after briefly mentioning her in only 2 minor instances. But this ID confirms that Lunaria is indeed a super account as well, and not just a forgotten plot point. Going one by one, Stacia, the goddess of creation, is SA001, Solus, the goddess of sun, is super account number 2, Terraria, the goddess of earth, is super account number 3, and according to the visual we have right here, Vecta, the god of darkness, is super account 005, which makes Lunaria, the goddess of the moon, the 4th super account in the registry, which is cool. Anyways, the only thing they didn't cover in the main control room scene is how Gabrielle was not very enthusiastic about Wasago, aka Poe, constantly and cheerfully referring to him as a bro, but that's just a minor nitpick. The entire scene was absolutely excellent. One may argue it is plot convenience that one of the god accounts not having a password protection. And while it is a quote-unquote convenience for the bad guys, it certainly is not without any merit. The problem is, you may need to wait until Core 4 to have an idea as to why it wasn't protected, so I'd like to ask you to trust me on this when I say it is normal that it didn't have a password, since I don't want to share future spoilers in my episode explained videos, just trust me please. Also, a minor change was that the squad was supposed to speak English in general, and thus Wasago was surprised when Gabrielle wanted to dive into a Japanese-speaking world because he simply didn't know Gabe was capable of perfectly fluent Japanese. But yeah, just a minor change that doesn't affect much there. While the main con scene was covered excellently, sadly, the sub-control room with Asuna, Rinko, Higa and Kiku is... let's say it takes a dive for the worse. Asuna decides to dive in and messages home before she does that, and there are a multitude of problems with this. First off, if you have outside contact, you use it for the military to ask help. Kiku is not just a military officer, he is the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs' VR division. Sure, Gabriel Miller has the support of a top military dude in Japan chain of command, so just hear me out, why don't you just reach someone from the ministry then? Bypass the military aspect completely, whichever level the top military brass is, and escalate the issue to the top through government instead of military. There is absolutely no way Kiku can't contact anybody outside of the military for help if Asuna can just message her school buddies through Ocean Turtle Wi-Fi online. And this creates even more major issues that I will highlight after the GGO scene, but let's have some happy moments with gorgeous action sequence. As mentioned, the GGO scene is from Sinon's point of view, showcasing her horror, and it really is focusing on that as well. We start with Sinon sleeping in a library, which is undeniably a great reference to what I mentioned in the perspective of Gabriel Miller. The teenage girl already spent so much time studying and stressing out in a library that she subconsciously would not have picked a library to set up her sniper's nest in a realistic VR game. Keep in mind that since the dream is from Sinon's perspective, certain things may look kinda unreasonable, like Sinon hearing a footstep behind her for sure, turning around with nobody there and Stabilizer appearing as she was turned around. This is not objectively what happened. This is what Sinon perceived of the situation, absolute terror against someone who she realized was always 5 steps ahead of her with intuition, and the music just doubles down on that terror. Just look at how unstable Sinon is, that despite lying down on the ground, perfectly still mind you, her bullet circle, which is affected by emotions, is wildly swinging around, barely ever matching the actual crosshairs of the weapon. And of course, Yoshihiro Kanno was listed as a storyboarder for War of Underworld Episode 3 staff list, so we pretty much knew something exciting and marvelous was coming for the GGO flashback a while ago. For those of you who don't know, Kanno is an action storyboarder, pretty much the lead of an action scene in simpler words. He's a very renowned action storyboarder and is also the guy who was in charge of Kirito vs Goblin scene back in Alicization Episode 4, just to give you an idea of what kind of a difference he makes when he appears. And Kanno certainly did not disappoint. The action is so fluid and very well choreographed despite being short, and despite feeling a little chaotic. Just as it should, because this is Sinon's perspective. It just makes me wonder how he would have portrayed the same scene, exact same scene, if we were watching this from Stabilizer's perspective with a calm and collected mind. I sure hope we'll get to see his side portrayed at some point, but for that, I don't have my hopes up all that much. But regardless, this is the kind of action I really want to see from Sword Art Online, very much personalized to the mindset of the character in focus, absolutely amazing animation and choreography, rather than watching some panning shots from a tripod camera. This is what the most of Alicization lacked, aside from Episode 4 Goblin fight and the Episode 15 Fanatio fight. There are other honorable mentions like Berkuli vs Yu-Gi-Oh, Kirito vs Dusolbert, Kirito vs Alice. They weren't bad by any means, but could have been legendary fights instead under the right hands. Whereas we got things like Eldri fight, Quinella fight, heck, the entire Academy fights were just light shows rather than fights. We need more of this kind of stellar care to the mentality of the fight, rather than impersonal showcases of power through wide panning shots with light particle effects. We have enough opportunities to have these kinds of proper fights, so I hope either Kano or some other renowned action storyboarder returns to handle those scenes rather than a directionless or inexperienced person leading a set piece. But that's enough praise, I feel like I've been going off on a tangent anyways. With Sinon waking up, it's time we wake up as well from our honeymoon and face the issues of letting every cast member know the circumstances so early on. Okay. It's stupid for a secret military facility to allow a high schooler access to a Wi-Fi to contact other high schoolers on private MMORPG servers that the military does not control to share top secret military secrets with said high schoolers. We established that much back in episode 6 of Alicization. But now with this new ALO scene, there are more questions to be had. How does Sinon know Ocean Turtle is under attack? From what we saw, that was not in Asuna's message. Is the Ocean Turtle raid public news now? If it is, how can a single top military dude keeps ensuring the safety of the attackers with public pressure? In the novels, this entire thing was kept secret, so it was easy to prevent a rescue op, only the military people had a say. If the public knows, then the president knows, the government knows, then a bunch more other military people know outside of the top single brass that is paid by the Americans. And especially since all of these people can now directly contact Kikoka through WhatsApp, Line, message, whatever they use. They can contact Kikoka and let Kikoka tell them the truth, impeach the corrupt military people, because the reality is obvious once you actually contact people on the inside through trusted sources. Other scenario is that Asuna did let Sinon know of the attack earlier, which doesn't change the fact that it means Kiku has uninterrupted access to the outside, which all of the above can still happen. Okay, Kiku and the government is just filled with idiots and the only geniuses are these teenagers in ALO along with Klein and Egil. Surely, if something is to be done, the actual adults in the room should step up, right? Sinon is not a leader, she's a solo assassin, never lived through the death game. Lifa is no leader, she's a kendo champion, never lived through a death game. Liz did live SAO, but she was just a blacksmith. Shilika did live SAO, but she's just a mascot. Klein over here is a young adult who has leadership qualities as the leader of Furin Kazan, as well as having extensive VRMMORPG experience that he gained by being one of the undisputable members of the clearing squad, facing death on dozens of occasions to save others without sacrificing anybody else. Egil, the cool dude here, is a proper adult who was the leader of the de facto tank guild of SAO since the floor 1 boss, one of the biggest contributors to saving lives in SAO. Even the simplest logic dictates that now they are involved with all this information, unlike the light novels. They should be the ones leading the help effort of the group, right? And this is no spoiler since these are stuff in the main canon since the contents of episode 1, it is Sugua and Lifa who will spearhead any kind of effort because the original story dictates that they are currently the only ones to know. So the big picture stuff is designed around the duo regardless of the circumstances here in the anime. You see how a simple anime original scene can destroy the entire narrative consistency and logic. Sure, the light novels are not perfect either, I can go ahead and nitpick them if I want, but it is not this much of a clusterfuck just because the director wanted to add some fan service scenes with fluffy cat ears. Everything that is present or is added to a story has significance, and these always need to be kept in mind when doing these kinds of changes. Fan service that works under the logic of the narrative always has a place in my heart. That's why I was very happy to see Klein assisting Asuna and Sugua back in episode 5, because obviously Klein is an adult, Klein has a driver's license, would be a valuable addition to the efforts of finding wherever the fuck Kirito was taken. This here, knowing Lifa and Sinon will lead the efforts due to the original story because Ono simply did not bother considering the effects of introducing two perfectly suitable characters for the job, much more capable than Sinon and Lifa in regards to life or death VRMMORPG situations, thanks to their 2-year experience with a life or death VRMMORPG situation. For all intents and purposes, the ALO scenes are the worst possible additions to the timeline, and there's simply no other way to put it. But from the lowest point of the episode, we get to the pretty much the highest point of it. Remember when I said Gabrielle's backstory was skipped, but that I was still certain they would showcase it soon, sometime in the next 2 episodes? Well, the moment where Gabrielle is diving is the reason why. We come from an anime original scene that was done absolutely wrong and have arrived in an anime original scene done absolutely right. You see, the moment of Gabrielle's dive was never described in the novels, it's an anime original scene. The scene in the light novels had ended with them deciding to dive, and the next time we saw them was in the throne room of the Obsidia Palace. But this dive scene is showcasing us a memory of the past from Gabrielle's point of view, the memory of the day he decided to become Subtilizer, the devourer of souls. And as I said, this glaring hint is put here for a reason, so I will not go into the memory and wait for the anime to portray it for you. It's a horrible, horrible scene, I'll mention that much, so be prepared once it's adapted. But that leaves us with the final scene, inside the Obsidia Palace of the Dark Territory. The scene is shortened as it starts from Lipia's arrival into Shasta's room rather than the Obsidia Palace itself, with dark mages simply ridiculing Lipia for a while, and goddamn they really changed Lipia's appearance from the light novels, that she just looks too cute rather than fierce. I can show you an image of her, but it is from the contents of possibly next week or the week after, so please trust me on that. She is just supposed to look a whole lot more rugged rather than a younger version of Fanatio. But my boy Shasta has finally arrived. He's undeniably the best character in the entire Dark Territory, so do keep an eye out on him. It'll be undeniably hard not to, not because he's just extremely hot, but because the next episode will definitely focus on him and hopefully his past, his life as a child of the Dark Territory, his time as a prodigy under a wise mentor, his time as a commander against another commander, and his current present. But that's pretty much a good moment to wrap it all up. Episode 4 is titled Dark Territory, and chances are we're gonna be experiencing the story from two different perspectives. The Emperor, who doesn't care about anything but the souls he devours, and the visionary commander who just wants the best for the children of the Dark Territory. Probably we'll get to learn at least a little bit about the Chancellor of the Dark Mages Guild as well, DIL, but that's not confirmed just yet. But if you made it this far, comment. Your soul will be so sweet in the comments below to let me know. If you have questions, do ask them. Weekly War of Underworld Q&A has begun last week with huge interest from all of you, so thank you for that. Remember, you must use hashtag AskGamerturk so I can properly filter through all the comments for questions. It's getting hard to sweep through the amounts of comments I'm getting. Thank you for that as well, not complaining, it's just please make my job a little easier by using the hashtag. If your question is a spoiler, write down a spoiler warning and leave a couple of blank lines first, and only then ask your question so the spoiler is not previewed. We don't want to spoil anime only people here, we're not Fox in anime. I promised Fate Grand Opinions would return last week, but something unexpected came up on Thursday last week, so once again I had to delay the return of it. It's not like YouTube reinstated my video for the first episode anyways after almost 3 weeks, so... Subscribe and hit the bell icon for all of that and more. Links to the light novels, manga and more are in the description. Channel merch is there as well as a special discount code for patrons and channel members too. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Huge thanks to my patrons and channel members as always, and until next time, stay cool.